On February 11, 2010, a chilling event occurred in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. A truck driver, driving along one of the city streets, involuntarily focused his attention on a strange object sticking out of a dumpster. The dumpster was parked next to a school. The man stopped the truck, got out of the cab, and headed for the dumpster. He decided to see what was in it. To his horror, the man found a woman's body in the dumpster. The driver called the police. At that time, neither he nor the police officers who arrived at the scene a little later could imagine what the woman had to go through before her death. The murdered woman's name was Jennifer Dougherty. There was no doubt about the violent nature of her death. Jennifer was born in November 1979. Her parents loved her very much, but Jennifer's childhood was not easy. She suffered from a developmental disorder of the nervous system. In other words, she was mentally retarded. At the time of her death, she was 31 years old, but her psycho-emotional state and level of intelligence corresponded to the level of development of a 14-year-old child. She attended a regular school, which in itself was a great achievement for her parents. The girl was often bullied by her peers, often returning from school in tears. She was not just teased and called names. There were times when she came home with gum in her hair. Sometimes the girl was even beaten. Due to her peculiarity, Jennifer was very trusting. According to her mother, she tried to see only the good in people. It is important to note the following. Jennifer grew up in the 80s. The internet in the modern sense of the word did not exist in those years. Children did not sit in their phones or gadgets. They could get information from books, from TV, or from friends and parents. It is difficult to judge how informed American society and children in particular were about the problems of people with special needs. Of course, there have always been children with disabilities, but as a rule, they were homeschooled, if, of course, they were capable of learning. Bullying of such children was not uncommon. There would be some bully in the yard, picking on a child with special needs, and the other kids, like wolf cubs, would gather in a pack and watch the bullying, and sometimes even support the leader. Nowadays, thanks to television and the internet, children, teenagers, and adults in general are more aware of the problems of people with disabilities. Therefore, a person with a musculoskeletal disorder diagnosed with cerebral palsy or a wheelchair user does not attract as much attention as before. Many of Jennifer's peers became more wary of the world around them with age. Jennifer, on the contrary, never lost that sparkle of magic in her eyes that is inherent in most children. Most of the residents of Mount Pleasant, where the girl was born and raised, knew about her illness and treated her kindly. Jennifer, living in a small town, probably thought that the same kind and nice people lived outside her beloved city. For this reason, her mother and sister, caring for her safety, always asked who she was communicating with. At the same time, her mother was a smart woman. She did not subject her daughter to excessive care. She did everything so that her daughter could live a full life. Shortly before the tragedy, Jennifer told her mother that she had made new friends in the neighboring town, Greensburg. There were 6 of them. Jennifer also told her mother that she was going to Greensburg to see a dentist, spend the night with friends, and return home the next day. Before leaving, she left a note for her mother with the following words: "Mom, I hope you have a good day at work, and I love you very much. With love, Jennifer." Let's figure out who her new friends were. They would later be called the Greensburg Six. Melvin Knight was 10 years younger than the victim. When Melvin was born, his drug-addicted father was in prison. At the age of 5, Melvin suffered a head injury when he fell out of a moving vehicle. After this incident, Melvin developed learning disabilities. He also had problems with social adaptation. Amber Meedinger was 11 years younger than the victim. Amber met Melvin at a homeless shelter in Washington state. After packing their things, they decided to travel together across the country in search of a better life. In January 2010, Melvin and Amber ended up in Pennsylvania. Amber was able to find housing in Greensburg thanks to her friend Ricky. Sources note that Amber met him in prison. How they met in prison is not entirely clear. So we move on to the third member of the six, Ricky Smearns. Ricky was the youngest victim by 7 years. He had a difficult life. His mother was a prostitute. His father was a member of a Pizza Hut gang. His parents abandoned him almost immediately. The boy wandered from one foster home to another where, by his own admission, he was subjected to physical abuse. By the age of 6, he had tried beer, cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. At the age of 10, he was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. By that time, he had already attended more than 100 sessions with a psychotherapist. At the age of 11, he began his criminal path. He robbed a neighbor's house, and in the same year, he sexually assaulted a woman by dragging her into the basement of her own house. Ricky was found and arrested. He ended up in a juvenile detention center. Prison time worsened his mental problems. At one point, he claimed that 7 different personalities lived inside him. Ricky was in a relationship with Angela Marinucci. Angela was 13 years younger than the victim. At the age of 13, she was hit by a truck, resulting in a traumatic brain injury. She began dating Ricky when she was 15. They hid their relationship from strangers, as they were afraid that Ricky could be prosecuted for corrupting a minor. Among their acquaintances, Leshember and Melvin knew about their relationship. Thus, a close-knit group was formed. Other people involved in Jennifer's murder were Peggy Miller, who was the younger victim by 13 years, and Robert Loren Masters Jr. He was older than Jennifer, 37 at the time of the murder. Jennifer met the above-mentioned people in the following way. On one of her trips to Greensburg, she met Angela at a bus stop. They struck up a conversation and found out that they had many common interests. After parting, they continued to keep in touch, talking on the phone for hours. The more often the woman visited the neighboring town, the more often she saw Angela. Angela, in turn, introduced Jennifer to her friends. On the morning of February 10th, Jennifer packed her duffel bag and typed a message on her MySpace profile that read, "It's time to start over. Make new friends and don't be afraid of anything." After that, she wrote a note to her mother, which we have already discussed. She also wrote that she would be back the next day, after lunch. In the letter, Jennifer left her friend's contact information in case of an emergency. Her stepfather drove her to the bus station, kissed him on the cheek, said goodbye, and got on the bus. The forensic expert, conducting an examination of the body, noted that the victim was tortured before the murder. Then, she was stabbed several times. No one in the Dougherty family believed that Jennifer's new friends could be involved in the terrible murder. The family was sure that the woman fell into the hands of the killer on the way to the friends. Investigators found out the deceased address of her friend from the parents and went to Angela's house. Angela refused to testify, but Amber Maitinger confessed. Let us note right away that the investigation managed to solve this case almost instantly. The criminals, as you understand, were not very smart. Amber said that Jennifer successfully got to her house. It was she who met the woman on the threshold. Jennifer entered, and Angela locked the door. From that moment on, real hell began for Jennifer. 6 so-called friends surrounded her and began to mock her. The situation immediately got out of control. First, they snatched her purse from her guests, took all the money, her cell phone, then they started pouring everything they could find into her purse. Lemonade, alcoholic drinks, nail polish, liquid soap. Then the beating began. Angela and Amber began to beat Jennifer. They took turns hitting her with a towel hanger, a vacuum cleaner hose, crutches. They poured various liquids on the victim's head, forced her to drink detergents, Then, vegetable oil. It got worse. Jennifer was forced to drink urine, then eat feces. Jennifer resisted. But what could she do against the 6 scumbags who attacked her? At some point, she managed to hit Amber in the stomach. Amber became furious and screamed that she was pregnant. The victim's hands were tied with Christmas decorations, thus depriving her of any opportunity to resist. Then she was shaved bald. Her face was smeared with nail polish. The helpless woman cried and begged the gang to stop the abuse. Melvin gagged her, stripped her naked, and began to rape her in front of the others. Then he said that now he needed to take a shower. He was all dirty from Jennifer. This moment became for the poor woman only a short respite before the next portion of violence and abuse. Then the Greensburg 6 faced a choice: to let the humiliated woman go and hope that she would not tell anyone about all the horrors she had to endure or kill, and thus get rid of the witness forever. They made their decision in the presence of the victim. Jennifer begged them to let her go, but the gang members understood that leaving the witnesses alive was very risky. On the morning of February 11th, her fate was decided. All 6 voted unanimously for murder. All that remained was to decide how. They forced the hostage to write a suicide note. They hoped that the police would believe that she had committed suicide. None of the 6 thought that there were traces of beatings on the woman's body. They didn't even question how the victim, who had stabbed herself, ended up in a trash can. When Jennifer finished writing her suicide note, Ricky handed Melvin a knife and signaled, "Strike." Melvin hesitated. It turned out that killing a person is not that easy. The monsters decided to feed Jennifer, mixing sleeping pills into her food. When she fell asleep, Melvin stabbed her 3 times in the chest and once in the throat. But even this was not enough for the killers to satisfy their sense of revenge. We will talk about the motive for the crime later. The abuse continued now over her corpse. The company wrapped the body in electric lights again. Angela said that the murdered woman would decorate their room instead of a Christmas tree. To their disappointment, the lights turned out to be faulty. The lights did not come on. Angela removed the garlands from the body, put a suicide note in the back pocket of Jennifer's jeans. Then they all transported her body to a dumpster near the school. If the truck driver had not found the body, the children would most likely have found it. Investigators tried to understand what provoked the incredible cruelty. According to one version, this crime was committed out of hatred for the woman because of her mental disability. The 6 decided to mock her in this way, realizing that she would not be able to fight back. Of course, not every healthy woman could cope with them. Look at their faces. But the victim's disability gave all 6 a sense of superiority and a sense of impunity. According to another version, the murder was committed out of jealousy. Angela noticed that her new friend seemed to have a romantic interest in her boyfriend. Ricky Smearns, while in custody, admitted that he was secretly in love with his victim, and she reciprocated his feelings. According to him, Jennifer repeatedly visited his apartment, and they made love while Angela was not home. One day, Angela, the girl of the river, accidentally overheard him talking on the phone with Jennifer. She thought that her new girlfriend was trying to take her boyfriend away. Angela made a decision. She needed to put the upstart in her place. To do this, she persuaded her 5 friends to take part in the persecution. They did not initially plan to kill Jennifer. The murder of Jennifer Dougherty was considered one of the most heinous in the state of Pennsylvania at that time. The general list of charges against sadists and murderers included kidnapping, rape, torture, and murder. In the course of the story, we focused on the 4 participants in the bloody massacre. Robert Masters Jr. and Peggy Miller were also brought to justice. They did not take part in planning the crime, but they witnessed the crime and did not take any measures to prevent the crime. In addition, according to the other gang members, Masters and Miller also voted to kill Jennifer. The defense at the trial tried to base their defense on the fact that their clients were afraid to object to Angela and Rick. Amber quickly realized that in order to get any leniency, she had to plead guilty to all charges. Amber claimed that Angela was entirely responsible for organizing the torture and subsequent murder of Jennifer. According to Amber, Angela came up with the plan and directed everything that happened. The court agreed that Angela did act as the instigator of the crime. All 6 admitted their involvement in the crime. Angela Marinucci was found guilty of first-degree murder. She was given the death sentence, which was commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The court took into account that she was 17 years old at the time of the murder. She was a minor. After the verdict, Angela did not repent of her actions and decided to appeal. During the appeal, she actually won a short-term parole eligibility due to a new Supreme Court ruling that was made in 2012. Ultimately, the court ruled that Angela would be eligible for parole and would be released from prison after 2070. As for the other participants in the crime, they also faced the harsh hand of justice. Amber managed to avoid the death penalty in exchange for a confession. She was sentenced to 40 to 80 years in prison. Realizing that she would spend the rest of her life behind bars, she also tried to get a pardon, stating that she regretted her actions and that she wanted to have the opportunity to change her life. According to the sentence, she can expect to be released starting in February 2050. Since she was pregnant at the time of the crime, she gave birth to a child in prison. The baby was placed in a foster family. Ricky Smyrns was sentenced to death. On February 28, 2013, after fully admitting his guilt, he tried to appeal the court's verdict. In February 2017, the court decided to uphold the verdict, finding that there is no real reason to keep Ricky alive given his actions. Melvin Knight was sentenced to death. He was the one who not only raped Jennifer, but also dealt the fatal blow, making him perhaps the most brutal of the group. He was placed on death row with Ricky, where they both remain to this day awaiting execution. Peggy Miller and Robert Loren Masters Jr. were sentenced to 30 to 70 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 30 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other terrifying crime stories that shock the whole world. Support the author with a like. Take care of yourself.